the line and talk about Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. Now, I have Julia, are you kindly able to put up the waiting room? Kindly.
I think Joy is the one hosting.
Yeah. It looks like, okay, I think we are also hosts now. We need to enable the waiting room and probably, thank you, Fatima, for joining. I think just as we do some, we'll be officially beginning at 2 in 25 minutes. So we'll, for now, put you in the waiting room and ask that you wait for us, even as we just finalize on the plans. Thank you so much, Fatima. Hey, people, kuna shida. Kuna shida. Aki, don't laugh. What happened?
What's going on?
So yesterday, oh my goodness. Yesterday, I confirmed with, well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you're picking this call from. We're very excited that you could join us for this yet another learning opportunity by the Kenya for Resilience Community of Practice. It is always an honor to do this and to have you as part of this conversation. We'll begin. I know many others will be joining us as we start this conversation, and we're very happy that you have been able to join us right from the beginning. As you might have seen, we have a great panel of experts that will be sharing with us this afternoon. And I will just go through a few slides just to give a background of why we are doing this. So the Kenya for Resilience Community of Practice is a network of practitioners in the field of resilience and disaster risk reduction. And we are very intentional about sharing our knowledge and to better enhance our practices in building resilient communities. These are some of the members. We have many more members as part of the Kenya for Resilience Community of Practice. And the genesis of this is that organizations by the Swedish Nation Council in 2018 came together and decided we want to continue having conversations that will better help us in our work in resilience. We began with about 12 organizations. Currently, we have over 50 registered members as part of Kenya for Resilience Community of Practice. As I mentioned, our goal is to really build resilient communities because we believe that resilience is about people and their strengths. So in the past, and especially this year, we have had very exciting conversations in resilience. We began with just unpacking resilience, conversations around integrating resilience. Later on, had great conversations around how do we measure resilience? Is it possible to do that? And in the last webinar, we talked about institutionalizing resilience. In a sense, how do we make resilience part and parcel of our work? And in this conversation, our members asked that can we talk about the triple nexus approach and how it links to resilience, and that's why we are here today. So in our conversation, we will unpack the resilience concept and also reflect on how it interlinks with resilience, and most importantly also reflect on how do we localize this concept of the triple nexus. We have a great panel of speakers, as you might have seen, and one very important speaker who is not on this poster is Sarah Nduko from the Kenya Red Cross, who will also share the experience. To begin us off, we will be listening to Olivia, Dr. Olivia Wilkinson. She is the Director of Research at the Joint Learning Initiative of Faith and Local Communities. Her research specifically focuses on secular and religious influences in humanitarian action. And today she will share about a research on triple nexus, localization, and faith actors that they did in South Sudan, and we are very excited to hear that. So without any further ado, allow me to pave the way for Dr. Olivia as she shares in this day of digital, in this era of digital work. She has sent us a video. She's taken time to put it together, and that we will share with you today. So Joy, I'll ask you to cue that as we listen to Dr. Olivia. Joy, I think the only thing we need now is a sound. As we wait for that, thank you again for those that have joined. And if you have any questions throughout this session, please write them on the chat box, and we'll be able to interact on that at the end. Take it away, Dr. Olivia.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Olivia Wilkinson. I am the Director of Research at the Joint Learning Initiative on Faith and Local Communities. I've been asked to give a very short presentation on some research that we did last year on the triple nexus and local faith actors in South Sudan. If you'd like to see more about the types of research that I do on the role of faith in humanitarian and development work, please look at our website. You can see the link on the screen. Otherwise, I'm happy to present this research that we did with Dan Church Aid and with my collaborators, Moses Alia and Florine de Wolf. So, to start the presentation, I'd like to say that the triple nexus and localization are about almost the same thing when it comes to partnerships, and that is better collaboration between actors. The triple nexus is about better collaboration between humanitarian, development, and peace actors. The localization agenda is about better collaboration between local, national, and international actors. So the question that we have to look at is, why is collaboration not happening at the moment? What's the problem with partnerships at the moment? And ultimately, it's a question of shifting power. Localization is shifting power from international actors. And the triple nexus is about shifting power between different actors at different times, to recognize that even though it might seem like a humanitarian crisis, there might be elements that are particularly important for development and peace actors to work in. Or even if it seems like a development moment, there's roles for the humanitarian and peace worlds too. I think overall, the findings from this research that we did in South South Sudan in 2019 with 21 interviews from local, national and international, both faith-based and non-faith-based NGO staff, found that 70%, by far the majority of local and national actors, work in multi-sectoral programs across many different sectors with triple nexus elements, so working across humanitarian, development and peace work. So in many ways, it's already happening. It's a natural response to the needs of people in their regions, that they don't see the world isolated into the silos of humanitarian development and peace as donors may do. But what we did find is that peace is often the missing element, and this has been reported as well by many others. However, peace is also the element where local faith actors can have the most influence and be the most important. Local faith actors, due to their trust and connection to communities, and understanding of their communities and contexts, can be particularly good at stepping into the roles of mediators, peacekeepers, peacemakers, peace builders. So therefore, we find that overall, the triple nexus and localizing the triple nexus must happen with the role of local faith actors, so that this important element of peace, really addressing root causes behind many development and humanitarian needs, can be addressed through the lenses that faith and local faith actors can bring. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Olivia, for that in absentia. I think a lot of things that she has shared from that we will also be hearing from our other speakers, and it's very exciting to hear that perspective. I will not belabor that, what she has shared. I want to go straight ahead to our next exciting speaker. Our next speaker is Eric Wanga. Eric Wanga works with ADRA Kenya, and he has a Bachelor of Science in Geology. He's also a technical expert in climate change adaptation, conservation, and earth science. He supervises and coordinates the work of ADRA Kenya at the country level. ADRA is the Adventist Development and Relief Agency, and this is a worldwide organization. And we come together because we work under the umbrella of the Swedish Mission Council. His expertise, as I mentioned, is also in humanitarian, water security, early recovery, food, and food security, and also in development work. So in his profession in disaster risk reduction and resilience, he will be sharing with us today from one of their programs, a programmatic perspective of triple nexus. And I want to, as Joy cues that presentation, just to emphasize that this builds up from what Dr. Olivia has mentioned, that triple nexus comes as natural, as a natural response to the issues that we have, and we might not see them as separate issues. And we'll just be hearing today how ADRA have been able to do that. So yes, I want to invite Eric Wanga. Go ahead and begin, and we are very excited to listen to you this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chelimo, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you are. Basically, what I'll be sharing about is how we have been working with communities in northern parts of Kenya, which is considered a fairly insecure, unsafe, with a lot of conflicts in parts of Kenya. So we have been working together with the communities on livelihood programming, and I would just want to share a bit on that. Next slide. Yeah, so maybe just as a synopsis, of course, the aspect of triple nexus of the emphasis, particularly from the Interagency Study Committee on Humanitarian Development, is that it is really not a cyclic process, a serial process, which one leads to the other and then the next, but rather a system that moves together. So anytime we are doing development, we are conscious to think about humanitarian situation that can arise, and also issues of peace building. So it is implementation, taking consideration all elements. Next slide. Yeah, so this explains it better. So in our humanitarian response, we look at development sensitive response and also peace sensitive responses. While when we do development, we look at the humanitarian sensitive approaches and also peace sensitive approaches. And also when we implement peace building initiative, we try and ensure that they are also humanitarian sensitive, but also development sensitive. So at all time of intervention or of working with the community, all these elements work hand in hand so that we can be able to achieve our different developmental objectives. Next slide. Yeah, so this is just an overview of some of the global processes that have taken place, and all these processes ranging from the 2030 agenda, I mean, the sustainable development goals and the recommendations of the development committee. All these have been stressing on coherence across humanitarian and development and peace action. Next slide. So in ADRA, how we interpret this is that really we have embedded this in our well-being philosophy, which is looking into holistic education, health, which is anchored on sustainable livelihoods. And anytime we do response, these are the aspects that we look out for. And when we implement that as part of our development programming, we look at disaster risk reduction in case there is an emergency and there is level of preparedness. And whenever we respond to emergencies, we keenly embed resilience into our programming while looking at those aspects of well-being. Next. So in this context, we work with communities. We try our level best to ensure that every form of interventions that we do are contextually appropriate. It means they are informed by engagement, collaboration, and learning with the local communities, and also the understanding of the social capital within the communities, which then leads us to a participatory process in terms of planning, decision making, and the organization of our programs. Next. Yeah, so just to elaborate or to demonstrate how we have worked in Mandera, the transitional process and also the interlinkage. So we started working in Mandera, Northern Kenya in 2011. This was a response to the drought, which was an emergency response. And as we were moving on with the response, of course, we, together with the community, developed kind of a nexus to that emergency response program that we were calling Food for Today and Tomorrow. So we continue supporting the relief assistance while introducing resilience components together with the interventions that were going on, and the community was slowly able to gain resilience and also to regain their livelihoods. And then, of course, in the midst of all that, while also we were doing that, we were also working on preparedness. So by 2017, October, there was another drought, and of course we were able to support in emergency response through the Mandera West Emergency Response Program, while also capitalizing on the resilience capacity. It was able, we were able to immediately in November to continue with the rehabilitation of ecosystem and agriculture project, which is now a fairly long-term development and resilience program. So in all these aspects, we have been integrating our development programs with the disaster risk reduction, and also our humanitarian responses with the resilience and development. Next. Yeah, so I would just give a broad overview of that program that we have been implementing in Mandera. That has three major approaches that we are using. So there is the farmer managed natural regeneration, which is mainly for rehabilitation of the ecosystem and also the environment, and also aspects of food production, kitchen gardening, and also building resilience around ensuring financial access. So the main thing that is that as part of the resilience or part of the community peace building initiative, we focus to introduce environmental protection into our programs so that communities are, because natural resource is mainly the cause of conflict among communities in this area. So in all programming, we try to embed natural resource management in the program so that it takes care of the elements of peace building as well. Next. Yeah, that's also a similar program in Kitui, which is also in the arid lands of Kenya, also looking at environmental conservation, water capture, and marketing, and also savings and loaning techniques. Next. Yeah, so when we do this, we really try our best to work with communities so that there is social cohesion and ownership. So we take on a bottom-up approach, and we also take on collaborative learning. So we incorporate both local knowledge and also building on the expert knowledge. So there is that merging or infusing of the different knowledges, working with community together, but also looking at self-empowering and ensuring that communities have local systems and local structures for conflict resolution. Next. Yeah, so these are just some of the forums that communities work together to ensure that we have the right system. So within the community structures, we have we try and build their capacities in their own project monitoring systems, accountability, and that way they are able to own the processes and they are able to prepare better. And through this, there is also that natural cohesion that comes, and they are able to work together even in a conflict-prone or a fragile environment. Next. Yeah, this is just some of the work that the community are able to do together, different communities working together and pulling together in terms of resources and sharing of the outcomes of those investments. Next. Yeah, still on social capital, working on things that communities do on a day-to-day basis, things that they do as past-timers, and the activities that they do generally as social activities. So communities are able to blend, work together, and there is more of peace building that is coming together. But of course, these activities are also increasing into their income and also helping in preparedness and cushioning them against any disasters or any form of calamities that might come. Next. Yeah, so I talked about the environmental and social benign approach, because really this is the greatest cause of conflict in this area. So a focus on natural resource management and also improving pasture, for example, access to livestock feed is a way of helping community build their own resilience, but also helping in reducing conflicts among the communities. Next. Yeah, so this is just some of the illustration of what is happening. So this is very common in northern and also in parts of lower eastern Kenya. So there is bare land. The entire land is degraded, eroded, and that is how the communities are forced to move further and further into other territories to graze their animals, to find pasture. And that is the cause of conflict often. So we work with these communities to rehabilitate these areas, and they are able to regenerate and have adequate pastures, and also promoting cut and carry and things like that. And with this, mostly the conflict within this community is minimized, and also the community members are able to find fodder for their livestock. They are able to cushion their livelihoods and invest. And yeah, so next. Yeah, so in conclusion, I would just say that our humanitarian development and peace building initiative always attempt to contribute to the holistic well-being of the lives of women, men, and children, and also to elevate and relieve them, the communities from poverty and distress. And we look at it from an holistic well-being perspective. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Eric, for sharing about your work specifically, and even in reflection to the work in both Mandera and Mwingi. I know, most importantly, just to understand how it practically works is very important for the those that have joined in this call, and to just give a broader picture of then how this translates both at a global level, but also more specifically at the local community level. We will be listening to Faye. I have to say that I met Faye only this week, and we're very excited to have her speak in this forum. Faye works as a senior humanitarian policy advisor with Dan Church Aid, based in Copenhagen, Denmark. She has worked with the Red Cross and UN in Myanmar, South Sudan, and has expertise both in the field, in these local areas, and also at the global level. She has specialized also in localization, triple nexus, and has extensive experience in the field of protection, humanitarian law, and principles. She's a co-chair of Charter for Change Advocacy Group, and also sits in the board of a European NGO network, Voice. And yeah, with that, I want to invite Faye, who will give a keynote speaker or presentation for this webinar. Very excited to hear from her. And at this point, I want to welcome her to share with us. So in Kenya, we say karibu. Karibu Faye, as you share with us this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Limo. And thanks for inviting me to your webinar today. It's a pleasure to be here and to share some of the learning we have collected over the past few years, where I would say Dan Church Aid, or DCA, has been on a journey to really get to a better and a common understanding in our organization about what Nexus means and how it translates into action in the various places where we work. Just to let you know a little bit about my organization, Dan Church Aid. I'm based in Copenhagen. We have a headquarter in Copenhagen, Denmark, And we work in 19 countries across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. We are a multi-mandated organization, so we work across the triple nexus. We work in the humanitarian sector, specializing in humanitarian mine action, cash distributions, and in development we do a lot of livelihood. We have a strong focus on gender and climate change. And in our peace work, we work a lot with local faith actors. We do a lot of trust and dialogue engagement. And we also work a lot on conflict resolution and local peace building. So that's just to give a little bit of a sense of what type of organization I'm working for. And basically, I mean, Nexus, as we heard earlier, refers to strengthen coherence and interlinkages of humanitarian development and peace actors and sectors. It's about overcoming the rigidity and the siloed approaches that we are seeing through a more contextual and non-linear perspective. So it's not just humanitarian sector taking over from one sector, the humanitarian, then being replaced by development, then being replaced by peace. So Nexus has become the new norm, but I would risk and dare to say that many of us, NGOs alike, nor donors, have reflected deliberately and internalized Nexus programming into our operations and into our funding schemes as well. Donors are still in the pilot stages of flexible programming and Nexus thinking themselves. So it is really an opportunity for NGOs to set ourselves apart and come up with solutions and suggestions and good practices on how Nexus, on how we adapt to the Nexus, and to influence policies and funding modalities. So that's what we in DCA have taken on for the last few years. The agenda for my session today, as you see, is I will go through why is Nexus the new norm? What does it mean to work across the Nexus? And I'll bring some perspectives from my own organization and working with partners. And then also the final thing, how do we localize the triple nexus approach? I think Eric touched on this excellently, and I'll continue down that line as well. Thanks for moving on to the next slide, Shalimo. So the big why. I mean, since 2016, the world leaders and UN agencies and NGOs, they met in Istanbul for the World Humanitarian Summit. And the big thing on the agenda was the growing humanitarian gap, finance gap, how to actually tackle humanitarian crisis with less money available and with even more challenges coming. So basically the main objective was to reduce this finance gap, meeting needs more effectively by thinking long-term development solutions into the early stages of the crisis. And by that, securing flexible funding from across the siloed into meeting these growing humanitarian needs. I guess also very much that we realized back then that protracted crisis doesn't go away after 12 months or 24 months. Protracted crises are deep and pervasive, and they last in average up to 9 years. I think even more so. We see refugee settlements and camps, refugees sitting in these places for 30 years. So right now in the humanitarian sector, where we have 12 months funding, sometimes less. In South Sudan, often we talk about 3 to 6 months funding. Then it's really, really difficult to address these long-term crisis settings. And so that was the idea. How do we bring actors and sectors better together, aligning them? So where are we today with the Nexus agenda? Getting more flexible funding, aligning sectors and actors on a shared agenda, and breaking down the silos. Well, From a donor perspective, and from our side, we do see some donors meeting the Nexus criteria. They are willing to engage with multiple flexible funding over several years, but a lot of donors are not there yet. So we really have a case to influence on this one. With the COVID pandemic, we are also seeing a lot more discussion on, do our system work? Are they flexible enough? Are they agile enough? And I think COVID-19 has really highlighted weaknesses in our humanitarian development system and how we operate. Are we fit for purpose? And do we really address the complexities in the crisis we are seeing? I think perhaps the COVID-19 could be a game changer in terms of addressing Nexus and localize the Nexus to bringing more local, national NGOs, local communities to the forefront of the crisis. Just to say that the why is relatively new. Nexus is a relatively new concept. And why is it different from before? Because before we called it resilience. Resilience is basically more or less the same thing, but I would say that the big difference is that you have much more donors attending to this agenda now. We have the World Bank entering the scene. We have the private sector entering the scene that you didn't have before. And I think that's the biggest change, that there are new actors on the block. There is a strengthened commitment to really make the Nexus work in order to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So there's a much bigger picture here that many more actors are very keen to make happening and succeed with. So I think also bringing the Nexus to the resilience conversation. Well, the underlying motivation for engaging in the Nexus are to strengthen sustainable resilience of the most marginalized and vulnerable people. It's about addressing the short and longer term needs simultaneously. And it's also to address the root causes of conflict and to build robust local actors to lead humanitarian response. So that in that way, the Nexus and the resilience concept are two sides of the same coin. And I think that's important to keep in mind, but really also notice that there are new actors on the scene. There is a strengthened commitment because the agenda is also linked to the Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please. So some of the challenges that I'm also showing you on the slide here. I mean, the humanitarian development divide, we're seeing that massively. We're seeing humanitarian actors really thinking or protecting the humanitarian space. In the humanitarian sector, their work is about saving lives, right? It's about saving individuals and often sometimes from governments who are engaging in a crisis where people are often the victims. In development, we work with systems, we work with administrations, we work with governments. So in that sense, the two sectors are a bit apart from each other. And with the Nexus, we're trying to bring these different ways of working together. That's a challenge, and it will take time to meet in the middle. The second part is preserving this humanitarian space as truly unpolitical and safeguarding humanitarian principles. And what we're seeing in, for instance, the Sahel in West Africa, we're seeing a strong interlinking between stabilization, military presence, building human rights, strengthening human rights, engaging with governments who are very much involved in conflict, and talking about peace. Peace in a Sahel, Western Africa context is that political peace processes, is local peace building, and a lot of actors, a lot of NGOs working in the humanitarian sector is dead scared of blurring the lines between what they do and then what states are doing and what military actors are doing and what peace actors are doing. So this whole mix of actors is also a challenge in itself. Then there is no agreed definition. When does the cycle stop? When does the humanitarian being replaced by development, and when does peace enter? That is also creating a lot of tensions, a lot of frustration, and a lot of misunderstandings. And finally, I would like to touch on this, how we focus, we get away from how we organize our aid to really having a key focus on people-centered approaches. And I think that's also what donors are getting more and more tuned into. They want us as NGOs and networks and alliances to have a strong focus on meeting the needs effectively, timely, and efficient. Next slide, please. So the what is Nexus then? I mean, as I mentioned, it refers to this strength and coherence and interlinkages of the different sectors. It's about overcoming rigidity and siloed approaches. And it's about taking context into consideration. And this requires everyone to work with very flexible, agile approaches, and also engage a lot of different actors. I would like to highlight also that Nexus is actually, a lot of donors are putting a lot of emphasis on Nexus, and OECD DAC has adopted a key set of recommendations that if you don't know these recommendations yet, I encourage you to really go in and look at these recommendations. They really give us all the things that we are working on. So donors have committed to people-centered approaches. They have committed to strengthening local responses, and they have also committed to really work in a flexible and multi-year funding approach. So that is something for you to just bear in mind. But also looking at the slide here, it's also strengthening local partners, and it's really also about preventing conflict and diving into the root causes of conflict. So that brings a whole lot of questions to what the Nexus is, but I think I'll move on to the next slide and look a bit on how have we done it in DCA. So operationalizing the Nexus for us and our partners have required us to go beyond project level and to really rethink how we work and structure ourselves. We have taken on a whole of organizational approach that compel us to rethink our strategies and also to be much more alert to the contextual situation. We have a much more cross-departmental conversation, bringing in country offices and headquarters and partners into a joint conversation. Some of the key questions we have explored is about how do we ensure effective collaborations with our partners? Do they have the right capacities? How do we strengthen these capacities? And how do we work across private, public, and civil society actors for transformative approaches? And just to give you an insight from one aspect, we work in South Sudan, and in the beginning of our webinar here, Olivia from the Joint Learning Institute was giving us a little bit of insights into working with local partners. And I think we did a study with them last year, and some of the things that came out was that our local partners in South Sudan, almost 70% of the respondents work across multi-sectoral integrated programs. They don't work in siloed approaches. The people they work with don't have triple lives. They have one life. And I think that's the thinking how we have to adapt our programming. We cannot have these siloed ways of working. The problem is that our funding is often very siloed. And what we did see in South Sudan was that local access sustainability is completely eroded by these siloed approaches in the aid system. and that local actors have to navigate ways across this humanitarian development and peace divide using short-term funding from different partners. And I think it's that thing about them being, they have worked across this nexus with communities is suddenly being eroded, is a very big challenge to them. So yeah, I think I'll just move back to here, see if I've missed anything. I also would like to touch on another type of project, that how we really try to translate the Nexus approach into our thinking, and that's working through a survivor and community-led crisis approach. And it's quite an innovative way of working, because it does allow communities to completely identify and lead their own response. We distribute cash grants to communities, and they themselves identify what their needs are. And that is those initiatives they can take can be cutting across the triple nexus. It can be setting up a water system. It can be supporting gender-based activities in the village. It can be livelihood activities. It can be anything that the community themselves think is relevant for them. And I think it's radical in the sense that there's no log frame, there's no project concept, there's no predetermined agenda. We don't ask the communities to focus on health or on livelihood. They decide for themselves. And I think that's the whole approach we have to move to. We have to let go. We as NGOs, especially NGOs, have to let the control go to the local actors, who then manage and lead the responses, because then you will see a lot more natural nexus approaches coming out. Because as I was saying, communities don't have triple lives, they have one life. And that's the proximity to the national communities that the local actors have. On that note, I think I would like to stop here. I think I've had my minutes. And maybe just, Chilomo, if you can go to the next slide. That's just one of the illustrations we are making in our operation when we go out and train our colleagues and staff and our partners. We develop different ways of illustrating what the Nexus means. And this is just one illustration of the Nexus from DCA perspective. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you so much, Faye, for bringing it into perspective. Excellently said. I wish we will have had more time to go through the approach or the thinking that you have on that last slide. But I hope we'll get an opportunity to do that during the question and answer session. I already see some very great questions coming. So let me just say, we started from the local. We went global. We'll continue with global and then finish with local. So keep being keen on the conversation. If you have any questions, please share that with us so that we can share it with the team. Thank you very much, Faye. Next, we have Lennart. I have had the pleasure of working very closely with Lennart from the Swedish Mission Council, who is a desk officer there, also the coordinator of resilience and the Kenyan focal point person at the Swedish Mission Council. He's also the national focal point person for GNDR, the global network for civil society organizations working in disaster reduction for Sweden. There's so much more I can say about Lennart, but I will not for now. I will invite him to share and take the next 10 minutes to, at that still global level, what does CEDA say about triple nexus, and also just reflect on the guidelines for triple nexus. So welcome, Lennart.
So thank you, Chilimo, for this opportunity to be a part of Kenya for Resilience. And I will just make a brief presentation of CEDA's Nexus guidance notes, which were presented like 3 weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, actually. So I think it's interesting for all of us to take part of those guidelines, even though the purpose is for SIDA themselves to understand or reflect on this, and for SIDA to provide guidance for embassies and so on, because we should know that a lot of the Swedish aid is channeled through embassies, and SIDA has a role in kind of influencing and guiding the whole system. So I think it's interesting for all of us. And yeah, next please. Yes, and it's very interesting that both Eric and Fia refer to the OECD DAC guidelines because those guidelines are actually recommendations on the humanitarian development peace nexus. They seem very important because this is an OECD legal instrument, which means that all OECD members they will be monitored. OECD have a peer review system, which means that they will check Sweden, how Sweden respond or implement those recommendations. And SIDA's Nexus guideline is very much a mirror of the DAC recommendations. Next, please. So I briefly will go into the terminology used by SIDA. So they Nexus, it refers to the linkage between humanitarian development peace actions. But I noticed that they write actions, and that's also what OECD DAC is doing, because ICWA, they mentioned actors rather than actions, and I have not assessed this if that means what it means, that some use actions and some use actors. Then SIDA is talking about a joint approach, and this is also, of course, coming down from the DAC guidelines. So actually, this is a presentation of both the DAC guidelines and the SIDA's guidelines. So joint up approach, that's a good to remember that word. It's a way of operationalizing the nexus through a coherent and complementary coordination, programming and financing of humanitarian development peace efforts. So it's a coherent and complementary joint up approach. And then what is important also in this is collective outcomes. So, and this is commonly agreed measurable results or impact. So for example, I know that Sweden has developed a strategy for Syria, and they have used resilience as a unifying concept in this. So that's, and they have tried to set collective outcomes. So next, please. So then resilience and nexus, this is how SIDA explained it, that increased coherence between humanitarian development and peace is closely linked to resilience in crisis-affected contexts. If the nexus is done well, it can be a way of strengthening people's and communities' resilience to crisis. That's how they put it. And also, as I mentioned, they emphasize resilience as a unifying concept in countries' strategies, for example. Next, please. And then in the introduction, there goes into an explanation of the three pillars. And the SIDA states that it's about the shift of mindset in analysis, programming, financing. And of course, SIDA, they discuss also the challenges or the risks that humanitarian principles might be compromised, but Sweden is very committed to safeguarding humanitarian principles. It's very clear, and I think in some countries the humanitarian aid has been quite politicized, but they really try to to safeguard humanitarian principles, even though they promote the Nexus. Yes, next. Yes, then SIDA is going into the three different areas, or the overarching themes, which derives from the DAC recommendations. That's coordination, programming, and financing. And it's what SIDA clarifies is that the point of departure is really the shared understanding of risks, needs, vulnerability, rights, resilience, and underlying causes of crisis. So that is really a point of departure in coordination. Next. And when it comes to coordination, SIDA emphasize that they should advocate for the use of joint analysis, that's what I mentioned before, and collective outcomes, also what I mentioned, among donors, multilateral organizations, NGO, national and local actors at country level. So SIDA, so NGOs are clearly included, so you should take your space in your conversation with the embassy. It's very important. So we from SMC side, we always encourage member organizations and partner organizations to link up to embassies and take space, because they should listen to you, and they are committed to that. And they emphasize, yeah, the importance of supporting local and national ownership. Next. So then when it comes to programming, SIDA emphasized that a people-centered approach, which tackles inclusion and promotes gender equality and so on, that's inherent in SIDA's work. So this is like basic principles, so that should of course then be guiding the work with the triple nexus. And they emphasize the strengthening of local, national and local institutions. Next. And that's financing. That is the third aspect. And SIDA points out the importance of identifying gaps in financing. And here they also again refers to both the private sector and the civil society. They should be a part of this, identifying gaps in the system in order to meet needs. And yeah, next slide. And what they also points out is that NGO that form consortia can have an important added value through close relationships with communities in a variety of area. And I think this is very good for you, Chelimo, when you approach the embassy with the consortia proposal. So SIDA really emphasizes the formation of consortia. And I know that the Swedish embassy in Kampala, they are supporting a consortia with 4 Swedish humanitarian actors in refugee camps in Uganda. And I think there are several examples. So they are very open for this. Next, please. And also, this is the last one. SIDA should prioritize partners that have the capacity to adapt programming as context changes and proven sustained engagement. So I think this is also something which speaks for you, because you are focusing on strengthening local capacities and ownership. So with the help of those guidelines, when you approach the embassy, I think it will be a benefit for you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Leonard, for sharing that. I think just some of the acronyms that were shared there. The DAC OECD is the Development Cooperation Directorate within the Organization of Economic and Cooperation Development. And I know we'll be able to interact on that further because, and especially on the guidelines from the questions that I have seen. So last, but definitely not least, allow me to introduce our next speaker. And as I do that, I think just as a reminder, kindly continue to share your questions on the chat box. And as soon as we finish this, we'll be able to just interact on them. So Sarah Nduku here is the Policy and Advocacy Manager at the International Center for Humanitarian Affairs, Kenya Red Cross. And as I said, we started local, we went global, and now we are back local just to hear some of the experiences working with a triple nexus approach. So without further ado, I want to invite Sarah to take the next 10 minutes just to share the experiences of Kenya Red Cross working with triple nexus.
Thank you, Chelimo. So I'm going to share just one case study of Kenya Red Cross's experience in programming that involves the triple nexus. The project itself was called the Partners for Resilience Project. It was being done with the Kenya Red Cross as one of the partners, CODID, Wetlands International, and CARE. So the project itself was meant to engage local communities to increase their resilience to their various vulnerabilities. And the counties we were working with is Samburu County. We were also working with Tana River County, Kilifi County, Laikipia County, and Isiolo. And as the people who are in Kenya might be aware, Samburu, Isiolo, Laikipia are counties that are usually prone to a lot of climate-related conflicts. So that is where the issue of peace building came into the program. In terms of the humanitarian aspect, the project was working mostly towards enhancing the resilience of the communities to the disaster of drought. And we were also working with policymakers to ensure that we were linking the interventions to long-term development programming within the county, such as helping the county governments we were working with to develop their county integrated development plans and their disaster risk management plans and policies, as well as making sure we support them through the development of their annual development plans and their annual budgets. So yeah, the project was bringing on the three elements of the project. Some of the key findings that we had in the implementation of the project is that people living in fragile and conflict-affected areas experience multiple vulnerabilities. The disasters they're exposed to by the nature of where they live is exposing them to disaster-related vulnerabilities, and many of the conflicts around these areas are also occasioned by disaster. For example, let me give an example of drought. If I can give an example of Laikipia County, when we were implementing the project, which was from 2016 to 2020, around 2017, there was a lot of conflict between the pastoralist communities and the ranches that are along the Ewasonyiro River. And the conflicts led to actually a bit of loss of life in the area. And as part of the people who are implementing projects in the area, we mobilized the pastoralists and the community to come together and engage with the ranchers who were representatives of private sector and come up with agreements or grazing. Actually, we supported them to come up with grazing agreements that would allow, especially during the drought season, the pastoralist communities to be able to access part of the ranches to do the grazing, because most of the conflict between the ranches and the pastoralists was around the grazing. Similar situations are also seen around Laikipia and Samburu, where during the drought season, when the pasture gets low, then the communities get onto each other's land, so to speak, looking for pasture, and this leads to conflict between the communities, and at times it leads to raids between the communities. So a lot of community-driven interventions are needed, where the communities themselves are able to sit mostly through the elders in the community and come up with agreements that both sides that are in conflict with each other can be agreeable on, to come up mostly through agreements between the communities that these are the areas that this community can graze on, and these are the areas that this other community can graze on, and these are the times that we can, for example, in Isiolo, identify a shared grazing ground for all the communities to graze their pasture on. These are just some of the issues that we had to deal with, especially in peace building. So the lessons we learned, as I was saying, is that the people living in conflict-affected areas are exposed to double vulnerabilities, and at times triple vulnerabilities. So they are especially more fragile than other communities. So you have to be able to, in your programming, be flexible in your approach, and also put the more marginalized communities at the center of the designing of the interventions. The other thing is that you also have to look at the nexus between which are the underlying factors that drive the vulnerabilities of the community, other than what is on the face value. For the most part, people deal with issues of peace building on the face value of it, while the underlying issue is the conflict of pasture and water resources that rises when there is a drought season. So if you can address the climatic conditions and the ecosystem around this as the driver of the conflict, you will have longer term interventions at the community level. The other thing is that communities and the community leaders, the local community leaders, as well as the government leaders, have to be brought on to the program during the design phase of the program, and not just during the implementation, because they are the most critical stakeholders, especially where issues of where the humanitarian issues are also touching on the peace issues. Many of us actors usually design projects and then get into the communities just to do the implementation. But specifically for this triple nexus approach, you have to, even in the design phase of the project, make sure that you're interacting with the community leaders, and the government actors, so that you're on the same page on which drivers of conflict that you're going to be addressing. Then another critical learning that we found is that including the peace element into humanitarian and development programming does not come naturally to many organizations. And especially in Kenya, where issues of peace and conflict are surrounded by matters of national security, getting involved in them as a civil society actor is a bit difficult. And a lot of criticism comes to the civil society actors who are trying to engage, particularly a lot in matters of security. So it is something that a civil society actor has to put a lot into consideration, and which is why it's also very important to make sure that you're working hand in hand with the government actors at the level where you're working, just to make sure that your interventions are guided by your humanitarian need to assist the communities, as well as the legal requirements for the national law, so that you're not becoming an impediment to the security of that area. The other thing that we learned is that there is need for a lot of partnership and
I'm sorry, Sarah, I think you could just unmute your mic even as you conclude. I think something happened there.
It's okay, no problem. Okay, I was talking about increasing partnerships for projects that integrate the triple nexus approach. And this would even bring actors that we don't necessarily work with as civil society, like ensuring that you have partnerships, particularly with private sector, because a lot of the resources that we need for humanitarian and even long-term development are nowadays coming from private sector, especially through the public-private partnerships that are now coming up and are fueling many of the development projects in Kenya. So bringing private sector into the discussion early on and making sure that you're able to design the project in a way that it brings a win for the private sector as well, and not just the public sector and the communities, is very important. For us at the Kenya Red Cross, we have come to understand that private sector are not just interested in the bottom line of making a profit like we have traditionally thought, but many of them, because they have social responsibility attached to their work, are also interested in working with the communities to improve their resilience and also to link their work to longer term development programming. Then we've also realized that the sustainability of many of the interventions that are especially linked to peace, development, and humanitarian work must be engraved in the policy making for a particular national or subnational level government for them to have sustainability. This means that if you're working, for example, to build peace through enhancing a community's capacity to climate change, which was what we were doing in the Partners for Resilience project, you have to make sure that you're supporting this by helping the county governments as well to develop laws and policies on the subject matter, like laws and policies touching on climate. And in those climate change laws and strategies, you also make sure that elements of peace are in there, and that you link these with the longer term development projects for the county government, so that you can have the whole nexus put in together into the policy. And this will make sure that first there is ownership of the county government, so there's continuity even when the project that you're implementing comes to an end, and that also there is going to be the goodwill and support from the county governments in your implementation of the projects. So that is it from me. Chelimo, back to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Sarah. I know there's so much more you could share from the Kenya Red Cross, and I have to say it's very interesting to hear practically how you have done it, and even from the lessons that you have had because of the work that you have been doing. We'll now go to a session of questions, an interactive session, just to hear some of the questions that you might have. We'll go through the questions that are on the chat. If you haven't written your question yet, please do so. And as we do that, one of the things we always do during our webinars is to share a question for the day. And this is really to challenge us to move the conversation from the webinar to practically in the field and the work we do. And I think, and our question for today is, how will the Triple Nexus approach reflect in your work? I know there's a lot that you might have picked, or I'm sure there's a lot you have picked from this conversation. So indulge us in the chat box and let us know, for you specifically, for your work, the work that you do in Mount Elgon or out in West Africa, how will this reflect in your work? How has this conversation changed your thinking? And with that, allow me to now just go to the speakers and interact from what they have shared. I have a few questions here, and I will ask them even as others come. I think the first question, the first two questions were to Faye. I know one has already been shared, and it was to share a link to the DAC OECD recommendations on the Nexus. If anyone of you wants to interact on that, a link has been posted on the chat box by Milward. Thank you for your question, Golia. And the second question he asked, Golia Kimanzu of Salvation Army based in Sweden asks, Faye, do you have documented successes of the cash transfer initiative that you shared?
Thanks for the question. I definitely think we have documented success of our cash interventions. The key question is, how does cash interventions lead to sustainable income and lead to resilient communities in the long term? I think that's, I'm not sure if we can document to what extent our cash interventions are actually showing long-term progress across the Nexus. But I think that's definitely something to try and test and see, because I think we have a tendency to utilize cash interventions as part of our humanitarian toolbox. And if it's not then met with more long-term activities such as livelihood activities, tools, trainings, capacity strengthening, market linkages, access to opportunities with private sector, then it loses its Triple Nexus perspective. So I think the link between cash distributions and how we do long-term development is the key thing. Whether we can document that, I'm not sure of, but I think it's definitely something to look into. Thanks, Julimo.
Okay, thank you for that. One more that I would also like you to respond to is about gender consideration. I will read the question as is from Purity Kagendo, and she asks about gender consideration in the Triple Nexus, especially women, who in many cases bear the brunt of humanitarian crises and seem to minimally engage in peace and development. Any thoughts on that, Faye?
Many thoughts. I mean, we have a problem in our sector because we have to realize that a lot of our programming is gender blind. Just to give you a number or figure from the humanitarian sector, 62% of all humanitarian programs are gender blind. That's a big problem because 50% of the world's population are women. So if we don't address the specific needs of women and girls, we fail. So I definitely would say, and also the COVID crisis has really also given us an insight into some of the challenges and horrific impacts on women, especially in terms of gender-based violence. And the first thing that has been cut during the COVID crisis has been gender-based violence activities. We did a policy paper involving partners from Uganda. And in the Ugandan context, women-led organizations are the first one to lose their staff to being harassed and not to be included in decision making around the response. And if that happens all the time, we certainly have to have a strong focus on it. So I think there is definitely a need to have a gender lens throughout the triple nexus approach. I think a lot of donors are very much aware on that and keep a high emphasis on it when we apply for funding. And we as organizations have to ensure who do we partner with? Are we actually partnering with the most relevant organizations, and are they only men-led? Are they not focusing on women's rights? So keep a focus on who you partner with and what they do to enhance a gender focus in their work. And that also includes engaging men and boys and religious leaders and local faith actors in that process. Over to you.
Thank you for that. Very interesting statistics there of how much our work is gender blind. 62%, that is quite high. Yeah, very food for thought, really, even as we design the work for the communities and with the communities. A question for Purity. This is a question from Sami Ikeni. I hope I pronounced your name well. He is with AIC Health Ministries based in Turkana County. I hope I got all that information correct. And he asks Sarah, how best can cross-border conflict be managed within Triple Nexus programming?
Thank you for the question. How we approach the cross-border conflicts that we were working in the project that we were working on is we took several approaches. Like I mentioned, the first one was we had to bring the elders of the community to sit down and write down a peace agreement amongst them. It worked some of the times the peace agreement was violated, and once one party violates the agreement, the communities get into conflict again, but then you bring the elders back and try and come up with a new peace agreement. We also worked on trying to address the underlying vulnerabilities that were driving the conflict, which was mostly natural resource based around pasture and water resources, by trying to bring water resources closer to the conflicting communities and away from the borders where most of the conflict comes on board, enhancing access to pasture when the drought is starting to come aboard, already supporting the communities to do destocking of their livestock so that you can even reduce the risks of cattle raids, which are more rampant during the onset of the drought season. The other thing we did was to work with the county government and the security agents at the national level to try and already work with the communities in disarmament of the communities. And I think you've seen in those communities, particularly, a lot of engagement with the national security agencies in trying to disarm the youth, as well as having interventions that target the youth to give them alternative sources of livelihood so that they're less reliant on the pastoral element of their lives, because they have alternative sources of livelihood for during the drought season. So in answer to your question, it's not a one-way approach to dealing with the conflict. You have to take on several approaches based on what the underlying drivers of the conflict are, and try and address all the streams simultaneously. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. To identify and address really the underlying issues, having in mind what Sarah said initially, that these communities, many of them have double, triple vulnerabilities that have resulted to where they are. I think the question to Leonard you have already answered by sending the report. dark recommendations. Thank you for that. The last question is to Eric, and this is from Mohammed Sheikh, and his question reflects on community engagement, and he would like to know if ADRA has engaged the stakeholders, especially in Mandera West, where you have indicated the project. And if so, how will this contribute to sustainability?
Thank you so much, Chelimo, and thank you for your question. Yeah, if I understood the question right, it was also revolving around involvement of grassroots organizations and working together with the grassroots community organizations. Actually, like I mentioned, and everyone else, this is a learning process for all of us, and it is a situation that as ADRA we have found in terms of operation, because ADRA is a network, a global network, but ADRA Kenya, as part of the global network, is a local organization. So we are actually part of the civil society in Kenya. And often this sometimes make it a bit difficult to define how we operate, because we work directly with communities, particularly in that region where most NGOs work through local grassroots organizations. So that has sometimes made it a bit difficult for us to explain how we operate, because as a local civil society organization in the region, we work directly with communities, we involve communities. So that sometimes appears a gap in terms of our involvement of local civil society organization, because the understanding is that ADRA is an INGO, which should then be working through the local civil society organization. But in terms of involvement of community, we work through a participatory process where community members make decisions, make choices, and supporting the planning and design of the program. And we coordinate with the county government system through the normal coordination systems that are available at the ward, at the sub-county, and at the county level. And yeah, so the gap there would be really an area for us to learn is the gap where we would endeavor to work more with the grassroots organization and also see how we can find space in collaboration with the grassroots organization and working together with them and also through them. Yeah, I want to believe that answers Mohammed.
Okay, thank you very much, Eric. With time, our time well spent, allow us to bring this conversation to a close. Festus has asked a very good questions. Festus Mukoya from FPFK, and as our chairman for Kenya for Resilience Community of Practice, when Kevin Kadiri of Eric's development partner comes to close, I will ask him to make a comment on that, how psychosocial interventions have been applied in Triple Nexus programming. And as Kadiri comes on, remember our question for the day. If you have not yet, kindly share with us in the chat box how the Triple Nexus approach will reflect in your work. Alex from Mount Elgon region asked if the Triple Nexus project could come there. I just want to mention that this is not a project, but a concept that we all are encouraged to work with or think through in our programming. And now that we have your contact details, we will engage you further on how to join the Kenya for Resilience Community of Practice, and also how you can further collaborate with us. For any of you who also would like to join the conversations around Kenya for Resilience, I would like to encourage you to follow us in any of these platforms. And you can find us at kenyaforresilience.org. That's Kenya triple-nexus.resilience.org that you could also be receiving information, but also you could join as a member and receive weekly updates and events that are upcoming. Kadiri, to recognize our speakers for the knowledge they have shared, but also to close this for us today, and to welcome you, Bwana Chairman. Karibu.
Thank you so much, Chelimo, for welcoming me, and you've asked me to also respond to Festus, and that will also form part of my closing remarks. But first, let me begin by saying thank you to our presenters today, Eric Wanga from Adra Kenya, Fee from Danchat, Leonard from SMC, and Sarah from Red Cross. Thank you so much for allowing yourselves to be used and to being able to give us this information. Thank you so much. We hope we'll be able to interact even the more as we continue engaging more in this topic and in this concept. I would also just again want to, and in the same breath, respond to what Festus was saying, based on what we've heard today and some of the information that we've also received from different platforms and different forums. I believe all of us see and realize how complex these things are, the complexities that are involved, and that is not to mean that it is impossible to achieve them. When I saw Festus' question, immediately what came to my mind was the Resilience Wheel by Lutheran World Relief, and there, there are the capitals, there are the capacities, and the thing is, it is a system. So you cannot just look at, ADRA may have made a presentation and they may have touched on livelihoods and so on, but when you look at the system as a whole, you have to look at the social capital, the physical capital, the financial capital, the psychosocial capital, others add religion in there. So there are complexities involved, and that also calls for us to adopt adaptive management as one of the things or one of the concepts that we work with. So that is what I would say with regards to Festus' question. But then I would also just want to echo what one of the speakers has also said, this triple nexus really helps us to even be able to achieve the sustainable development goals. If you think about it, because even from the SDGs, we read and we are told and we know that they were designed intentionally to represent a new approach to development, where we are bringing together the economic, the social, the environmental dimensions, and also acknowledging that all the decisions and all these approaches, all of them are related, and it is everyone's responsibilities, and they all have synergies and trade-offs. So it is not about one person, one organization, one government, one institution, one INGO. It is for all of us, schools, communities, individuals, organizations, private sector, public sector, to come together. And like I think Fia said, it's a multi-sectoral, it's a multi-stakeholder approach. On one organization may not be able to achieve this, but when we come together, and I think that is SDG number 17, partnerships. When we come together, then we are able to do this. And this session has just also reminded me of the 5 P's of the SDGs, the people, the planet, peace, which is the other P. Yeah, people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships, And when you think about it, when you think about the triple nexus, and you'll read from the SDGs, there cannot be sustainable development if there is no peace. For you to have a just and sustainable society, an inclusive society, someone talked about gender, and there could be so many other, issues, people living with disabilities, then you need peace, you need a planet that supports the needs of the present or the current and the future generations, You need prosperity, and even as we work through towards prosperity, it must be in harmony with nature. So you will see when you look at those 5 P's, then you're able even to see the triple nexus. You're able to see the humanitarian, the development, and the peace coming together into those three concentric circles and in the middle, and there we'll be able to achieve it. So that being said, this is just to say thank you so much for the presenters. Thank you so much for Swedish Mission Council for supporting Kenya for Resilience Community of Practice through Children's Mission Sweden and Children's Mission Africa, which has made this webinar possible. Thank you for the team that has organized at Children's Mission Africa, and there's also another smaller team, Caroline and her team, and Faith. Thank you so much for also sitting and thinking through and being able to help us be able to receive this information. So from that, I have no much to add or to say, but just to say thank you so much. From the presentation, several things that I've picked from ADRA. This thing does not take one day. It is not a one project. You've heard them. They began in 2011 as a humanitarian work. In 2020, it has now come together, humanitarian peace and development. And they mentioned about collaborative learning. They talked about utilizing local resources, localization agenda. For those of us who are part of GNDR, from fear, I got the triple nexus calls for innovation. Everyone is trying to figure out practically how this thing comes together, works, is measured, is successful. We must innovate. We must build to adapt. And the nexus and resilience are two sides of the same coin. So yes, it may seem complex, but it is possible. So again, just to say what Chelimo said, to keep this conversation going, go to the Kenya for Resilience website. Julia can post the link there, subscribe and become part of this community of practice from wherever you are, and we'll be able to continue this conversation. There are thematic groups in there that you can join and that you can contribute. So thank you so much, and may we have a lovely evening. Over to you, Chelimo.
Well said. I have nothing to add. Thank you for your time, everyone. We hope to continue to collaborate together. Enjoy your evening, enjoy your day, wherever you are. And up until the next one, we continue to strive towards building resilient communities. Thank you very much, everyone, from us at the Secretariat of Kenya for Resilience and the Leadership. Goodbye, and thank you to everyone and all our speakers. Bye-bye. Thank you very much for joining us. Yes, we will give you some time to leave so that we can also just be brief and get to hear. But in case you want to share your experience, feel free to. how you found the webinar. Otherwise, you could leave the meeting and then we will remain behind as the organizers and just debrief. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Bumi. Bye. Yes. Sasa tuko tu sisi. Hi, ladies.
Hello.
How are you?
Hi.
Or how was it, rather? Maybe ask Kadiri to come back with the brief. How was it? We can start with Mercy. Or we start with Faith.
I think Faith can go first.
I think it went well. We managed, time was well managed. The slides were flowing. Yeah, slides were flowing and time was managed well. So the speakers kept time.
Okay, thanks for helping us keep time. I was forwarding the messages you were sending me, but I think they were not seeing it. But yeah, I think you told me they still kept time, apart from Kadiri. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Julia, you'll note these things for your report. How was it, Mercy? This time we did not involve you in the planning, so you can give us some background of how you found it from the speakers, the content, the execution.
So of course, a good job. I think you could see that it was well organized, it was prepared. It wasn't just something that you woke up today and decided, let's do this. So it was evident there was a plan and there was a team behind the scenes just supporting. So good job. I think my highlight is the quality of speakers. And I think that's the value of having a community of practice, that you can have internal speakers like you had from ADRA and what was the lady's name?
Sarah from
and
Kenya.
Sarah. Exactly. You had, and even Kenya Red Cross is not necessarily within the COP. So we had local content, which is very important, but we also had people from all over the place. So I think then this starts showing the value of such a community, that you have access to people you'd otherwise not have access to, who have legitimately expert knowledge, have experience, who are passionate even in the way they were presenting. So I really congratulate you in terms of the value and the quality of speakers that were present today. I definitely liked that you had Leonard present. One, he gives us, information from the angle of the current main donor of the COP. So at least we know the priority areas and such things, which is always helpful. But also just involving them is extremely good, because then they know what is going on and they feel ownership to the community of practice. So that was also very good. Finally, it's good that we had people from all over the place. Like, we didn't just have local Kenya. And even so, the first chat was, will this session only be in English? I was like, okay, that's definitely nice that our sessions are getting such coverage that we might need to say our webinar will only be conducted in English. Like, it's necessary to say that just to show how global we are becoming and stuff. So I really appreciated that. Congratulations on keeping time. You are 4-5 minutes over time. So that's not easy for an African session. So yeah, that was good. One thing to improve, not to improve, I don't know what was happening. There were some places where the sound was, becoming lower, and then it's clear, crystal clear. So it's not that it wasn't audible, but it was sort of in a way muffled. So that could be for the end of the speaker, but just to see how those things can be ironed out beforehand. Yeah. Okay, I'm done.
I agree with you. I think we will encourage speakers to use headsets, even if it's just earphones. It helps because we struggled with both Eric and the video, and it's because the speakers were not using, but even Leonard was not using, but I thought that was my observation. So it was, not very clear. Thank you, Mercy. Kadiri, how was it? What did you like? What can we keep addressing, enhancing?
Okay, thank you. I came in, I think, 7 minutes late, so I missed. I think I came when the first speaker, I thought it was a first slide, then I heard her say thank you. So you've said that there was a video and it had sound and the sound had a problem.
The first speaker, Dr. Olivia, was not in person. She recorded a video, about a 4-minute video. It was very good. There's so many takeouts. We can share that with you. We'll also put it on the Resilience platform. The sound quality, we had tested it. The sound quality was good. We had even done a mic check with Eric, and the sound quality was good. So I don't know what happened.
For the video, I don't know whether you did that. I actually learned it last week that when you are sharing your screen and you're playing something that will you'll need the sound, before you click on the rectangle that has a screen you're sharing, there's a place where you click on sound, so that now it becomes a bit more clear. If that
I don't know if maybe you did that.
I don't know that she did that. But anyway, I enjoyed the entire session. I think just like I found Mercy saying, the speakers were well versed with what they were saying. They knew what they were saying, and it was really good. I think that approach that was taken, that you could if Kenya Red Cross and ADRA did not present, then I think would have remained hanging, in the sense that you have the policies, the big documents, the dark guidelines, but really there is no demonstration of, okay, so let me see how this thing is working on the ground, And I think ADRA and Red Cross brought that out really well. Of course, challenge is always that sometimes that you could see by some of the questions that most often when people start thinking about resilience development, it looks like it's a livelihood project. So people start asking, why is psychosocial, why is this, why is this, why is this? Because most often it appears as though it is just livelihood. So maybe in future webinars, we may also want to find projects that will not appear as though they're just livelihoods, but that will bring out some of these other, what is the right English word? Is it benign or zile zimefichika? These other cross-cutting concepts that sometimes may get lost. But all in all, it was really great. It was wonderful. Thank you so much for the team, for the organization. I enjoyed the session and I learned as well. Yeah. My comment on how the reflection was true.
Okay.
It was not
I think you did very well.
to fill space.
Yeah, your summary, I think, from all the sessions was very good. Joy, Julia, in that order, and then I'll just finish by sharing my thoughts.
I'll say that it went well, despite having one of our speakers confirm last minute. Good job, Chilimo, managing, and Faith assisting with the timing. I forgot to share my audio as I was playing the video, but thank you, Chilimo, for reminding me. Yeah, I think it generally did go well. Yeah.
Julia?
Yeah. I think the highest number we had throughout the entire webinar was 45, right? Which it's close to the target we had. Yeah, so that for me is a highlight. It's good. It tells me the webinar was successful, and yeah, and the presenters also are, like Mercy said, quality. Yeah, so it was good.
Yeah, I have enjoyed it. When the numbers are not coming in as fast, I started stressing, and then I realized, imagine the people who need this information are here. So I'm glad it went well. I know we can, of course, improve with how early we start in sending the invitations, and that we can keep improving on. Yeah, I think the only question I had for me was the flow of the presentations. At some point, I felt like Leonard should have started, and then Faye, and then Adra, in that order. But I guess it just calls for meeting the speakers earlier and just hearing what do you want to share, and then knowing how to better order it. But I think it went well. I really enjoyed Faye's presentation. I think she has been working with this for a long time, and it looks like she wants to further work with us, or she's linking us to localization work stream. So yeah, we have an opportunity to do some follow-up. I want to say thanks to Joy and Julia. They have worked, we have worked hard on this, and they have really pulled their weight. And Faith for joining this. I think we have planned all webinars together, and then just being there, not just in conceptualization, but also in execution. Thank you for that. This is, I think, one of many to still come. So we'll continue working together, Faith, on progressive webinars. Yeah, we have a task to link partners. I think there was an organization in Nigeria with ADRA and so on. So Julia, as you do the report, kindly go through the notes, the chat, paste all the questions and all the reflections from the question of the day. And also the organizations that we need to link with. I think that the Nigerian one, the Mount Elgon one, I don't know if there's another that I missed. Yeah, but I think it generally went well. And we can keep stepping up the numbers, the quality of presenters, the conversations and so on. I think we definitely can continue improving that. We have very good certificates for the presenters. We will be sharing with them. Just for your information, Mercy, Kadiri, and Faith, just as a thank you for being part of this, that we will share with them soon. I think with the few changes, we could even share that with them today. Yes, and so that I let you go, we have a science cafe, Kadiri, and Mercy, and Faith. We're planning for a science cafe on the 10th of December and a GNDR National Coordination meeting on the 11th of December. They are both physical meetings, and we'll be sharing the communication early next week.
Okay, good, strong end to the year. So good job. Yeah.
Yeah, we check off these things. Then we have money. Also, we have resources for. Haya, kwaherini, asanteni sana.
Asante, good job.
Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Sasa nitoke.